First, I'd like to warn you that if you're looking for a review of the Oculus Rift, I'm probably not the place you want to be. I'm going to be doing a kind of first impression of the Oculus Rift from a pilot's perspective. I have a fairly extensive background, starting with light airplanes, and I flew F-4 aircraft, fighter aircraft in the military, and then ended up flying 35 years for a major airline. I'm now retired. So let's take a look at the Oculus Rift. The recent price reduction to $399, including the touch controllers, was just too good for me to pass up. So I had to see what this was all about. Now, first thing I'm going to tell you is pay absolutely no attention to what you see on the screen. I've been underwhelmed by many videos I've seen posted by people using the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, and really been disappointed and not really inclined to get involved based on what I saw. But I want to give you my impressions, what it actually feels like. What it feels like with the headset on is totally different. I do notice people tend to move their heads a lot when they're taking their videos, because that's what we do when we're flying, but actually you don't notice that at all in the Rift. It just seems natural to turn your head and see what you see. I noted no real lag. Now my frame rate was a little low because I don't have a super strong computer, but I gotta say it was still usable. The headset runs at a high rate, but some people, including me slightly, when I got really crazy, felt some motion, a little bit of motion sickness. I never felt that in an airplane, but I have felt that on roller coasters as I'm getting older, so maybe that's a part of it. Anyway, the scale is amazing. It feels like you're in the real world. I've been in lots of expensive airline simulators and others, but I've never had that feeling of actually being there, especially flying visually, looking out of the window of the simulator. It always seemed kind of like a video game. This thing is so awesome that at times when I have the controllers in my hand, I want to set them down on the seat, and I reach and realize there's nothing there. There are a few times when the controls aren't where you want them to be, and we'll talk a little bit about the touch control as we go on. But I think all in all, it's a very amazing thing. There's a great wow factor, and I find it is very immersive, and it has its limitations, but it is definitely worth a try, especially if you want to do visual flying. I think it's really good for that, good for learning how to land an airplane. The sense of distance above the ground and perspective and all those things make it very easy to land an airplane compared to some simulators. I like X-Plane 11. I assume it works about the same with all the platforms, and I will try DCS at some point. But I wanted to give X-Plane 11 a try because it really is my simulator of choice. I'm a big one for cockpits and controls, and if you watch my videos, touch control and that sort of thing to fly the airplane. But I do find that this is definitely worthwhile. Now I'm reaching down now to get my touch controllers. There I'm picking it up, putting it in my hand, it comes to life, and then you see this little bogus hand. See me erase the flaps there. I'm going to play with the throttle here and see, and you can see it shows me a little axis and I can move it in and out. Okay, I'll shut off the mixture and turn the battery off. Reach over there and turn the battery off. It's not quite as easy as it looks. It takes a little while to get used to it. I'm not in love with this interface. I think it could be improved, but it is usable, but not great for training. Now here's the F4. I'll tell you one thing about this. It looks pretty good in this picture, I'm sure, on the screen, but the resolution is not as good in the headset. That's one of the cons. It does have that screen door effect slightly. The resolution, I know there's a way to improve the resolution some from what I was operating it, but the frame rates on my computer at times was dropping below 30, and I think that's one of the reasons I may have been feeling some of the motion sickness. As I said, I felt the motion sickness usually when I was doing aerobatics or wild maneuvering, rapid turns, and also when I just had the headset on for over an hour or two when I got carried away a bit with my over exuberance when I first tried this thing out. Now you can see I'm just playing around with the hand. I have still using my control yoke, so I have the hand on the right side. There's one for each hand, but I find that you really need to pretty much use your right hand, and trying to run the throttle with it isn't really that cool. You need something to hang on to. So my suggestion is lay it down and pick it up when you're on the ground to do your ground operations. there's got to be a better solution, like a glove or something like that you can wear that will allow you to handle the throttle and stick and still be able to handle this. Now, I'm going to over-rotate here in just a moment and give a stall warning. But you get the idea looking out the windows there. It is quite an awesome experience, and to be able to look around. It's unlike Track IR. You don't have to kind of look forward while you're turning your head sideways. I mean, you just look where you're looking. See the reflections off the canopy there, looking back through the ejection seat face curtain handles. Looking back, actually getting into the seat a bit there. Little stutter with the frame rate, but you get the idea. Here we'll see the airport. We're at Nellis. I think I took off at Nellis there. You can see the airport there on the downwind. So it's quite immersive experience, and I think it's really going to be great for fighter type aircraft where you have HOTAS stick and throttles, where you don't need to handle a lot of switches. Now to the Boeing 737, another airplane that I've flown probably about 15,000 hours for a major airline, and actually the graphics in the simulator are so much superior as far as looking real than what you see here. That three-dimensional effect just adds so much to the whole experience. But as I said, the visibility or the resolution is not great, and when you're looking ahead at the instrument panel, I think the default position sets you back a little too far, a little unrealistically far from the panel. But still, it requires a little strain to read clearly the instruments, and the writing on the dash on the instrument panel is not that visible. So that is a definite negative, and it's really not that usable for training, I don't think yet, except for visual training and flying, contact flying as we call it in the military, or visual flying, learning to take off and land, and flying by maneuvers over the ground, that sort of thing. I think you could do that quite well. A little dragged in on this approach here, but you just notice the runway seems so big when you're coming in. It just seems so wide and big, and it seems much easier to land near the center of the runway than it does when you're flying just with a screen, even a big screen. I have 50-inch screens and 3 in my simulator, and I still find this is a little bit easier to use. So my suggestion is, if you have a fairly powerful computer like an i5 or an i7, you have a good video card, and I'm using a 1070, and it seems to be, in my opinion, probably on the edge of where you want to be. I mean, if you want to tweak up your visual settings, you're definitely going to need a pretty powerful video card. But in 6 months that won't be a problem as the performance increases. But what would I like to see happen with this sort of thing? I think it's definitely here to stay. Like I said, it'll become more and more prevalent as the price comes down. I think the price of there's a new version of the Rift coming out probably by Christmas. It's going to be cheaper, even cheaper still. So I would suggest when it reaches a price point that you can afford it, try it. It was far exceeded my expectations. I had tried it once or two at a computer simulator show, but I was really surprised to spend some time in it. That it was quite a joy. And there's a lot of other games that come with it too, but flying is my thing. I've never been a gamer other than that. I would like to see, as I said, a glove with some fingers that even had some force feedback, so you could feel like you were touching a switch, and maybe or the possibility of having some way to calibrate the location of a dummy board with just dumb switches, that you would actually grab the switches on a dummy board on the overhead or forward and just touch the knobs, or some way. Right now, as you'll see here, you can see me turning there, shutting down the airplane, and what you find is that when you touch a knob, it gives you a scale that goes left and right, and you have to slide your finger back and forth. Well, that works fine, except it's just not realistic, and since the Rift can sense rotation, I think it would be much better to have some way that you would grab up towards the switch, and you would feel some kind of feedback in the glove pushing against your fingers so that you knew you had the switch, and then you could rotate it, and when you released it, yeah, you could rotate your finger back and just continue, just like you would turn a real knob. I think that's doable. But if not, it would be nice to be able to get in the simulator and touch a few corner points of the board and calibrate those, and then have the board completely calibrated to your simulator if you were going to be using the same airplane. And that way you could look and see the switches and everything would be in the right place when you grabbed it, and you would actually turn a physical switch, maybe with no not even wires hooked to it, but you would turn a switch and it would sense the switch movement with your glove, and that way you would be able to operate. I think the glove is probably the number one thing, and there may be one out there, and if there is, post it and tell me where to get one. The other idea I had was pass-through video, maybe some way like a blue screen where you would actually be able to build a simulator cockpit and use that for the inside, and have the video synced up so that you would see your hands and your legs and feet and everything in the cockpit, but when you looked out the windows you would see this awesome 3D image. So that's an idea. At any rate, I would say this is a definite. You should look at it if you're inclined at all, and if you like simulation, and you have a computer that can handle it, and you're not going to have to spend a fortune. Consider it. It's great fun for me, and I've enjoyed using it. And I just don't think you can find much more realistic way to flight sim. And when they get the resolution and the other issues sorted out, I think it's here to stay. Thanks a lot. Send any comments below. Subscribe if you're not on my channel, and I'm going to continue to try to continue with things about simulation that interest me and that might interest you, and try to throw in the perspective of someone who spent his whole life in the cockpit making a living in various forms of aviation, from civilian, military, and airline. Thanks a lot. See you again soon.